Okay, so real briefly, we want to just talk about this this idea of has the bureaucracy grown, or what has caused the bureaucracy to grow. So undoubtedly, the bureaucracy has grown since the creation of our country because the bureaucracy is not in the Constitution. Only the president and the vice president were discussed, but there is a phrase in Article 2 that says the president will have advisors. So like from the very beginning, Washington created positions. And then over time, as the scope of our government has changed, then we've we've created new bureaucratic positions. And especially in the modern era, as we've really have become more diverse and we've had more policies, and we'll look at some examples of that. So figures show that right now about 2.5 million people work for the federal government. So that's quite a lot. They don't get the same kind of attention, but like I said, those are the people that we're going to interact with. In terms of historically, you guys probably could have guessed this. The growth of the bureaucracy, why would it have exploded so much in the 30s? Right, the New Deal, okay? And then the other explosion we kind of see right here, it's pretty significant. So what was happening here? Okay, so let's take a look. All right, so you guys remember this. I know that your U.S. history teachers drilled this into your heads because I saw it. You referred to it as alphabet soup, all those different agencies that were created as a result of the New Deal. So if you think about all of those policies, we never had them before. We had to create people that were going to actually fulfill that if you wanted it to happen. And so some of these agencies still exist, I can't really read them very well. The FDIC is going to be in there, and the Social Security Administration, all those different agencies. The other time period that we saw a lot of significant growth was this. Does anybody know who that is? LBJ, very good. And so if you remember when LBJ was an expenditure on foreign policy, but then we had that expansion in terms of the war on poverty. We had federal oversight of a lot of things that were going on in the states, like education. So when you're going to see the growth of bureaucracy is when you see the growth of the federal government. That only makes sense, because if the federal government's going to do more stuff, then they're also going to have to create more agencies to be able to do those things. One of the things, and I think it's important to see, if you look at a graph from the 1960s to today, the percentage of people in our country that work for the federal government has not changed much. So it stays really consistent, and I'll show you this chart, and then we'll go back. So this chart shows that over the last 40 years, about 10% of the country works for some level of government. So the red is working for the United States government, the blue is working for a state government, and then local is actually the biggest employer. And what would local government be? What kind of jobs?
State, governor, teacher?
Firefighters, police officers. The postal is going to be the United States government because that's okay, sanitation, yeah. But okay, have you noticed when they come around and they pick up your trash, does the trash truck say City of Frisco?
No.
Right, some kind of company, right? I don't remember who the company is now, because the reality is all levels of government, like everything else, have gone to the idea of contracting employment. So remember in geography you learned about that concept called outsourcing, where a lot of American companies employ people in other countries because it's cheaper or more efficient? Well, we do that within our country too. I bet a lot of your parents have a job and they do something, but they actually, they work for one company, but they're doing a function for a different company. They work for Hewlett-Packard, but they're working for Kraft. So they're doing some kind of function for that company. That's just become really common. It's another level of bureaucracy because it's increasingly specialized. So you have companies that just isolate and do one particular thing. Well, the federal government does that too. So the statistics that show you that the bureaucracy has not grown is a little bit deceiving because if somebody works for, say, the trash company, they're not employees of the local government. They're contracted and they're paid by the local government, so it comes out of our budget, but they're not technically employees. So that's a little bit deceiving, okay? All right, so what I want you guys to do then, one more time, flip your paper over, and you have another question to answer. Question 2 says, what has contributed to the growth of bureaucracy? Compare the scope of bureaucracy, so what we regulate and what laws we're enforcing, to the relative size. So what has happened to the scope in terms of the size? And I will ask a couple people to share what they think here. And y'all can talk about this if you need to, if you're uncertain.